Today, Ted Nugent, rock and roll guy who's been on the program before. Mr. Nugent, good to see you again. How you doing, man?
Well, happy October to everybody out there. Jim and Kyle and Jordan and Tim, glad to be on with you, man. I'm celebrating truth, logic, and common sense with people who care. God bless you.
All right, here's the first question. Your buddy, Kid Rock, he flirted with running for office. How many times have you been asked to run for political office?
Per hour or per week? You know, again, I mentioned truth, logic, and common sense. I share campfires, both literally and figuratively, with great families across this country. And God, family, country, Constitution, Bill of Rights, that man in the arena work ethic, law and order, those are the battle cries of good families in this country. And they know that I've always stood up and raised hell for those basic traditional values and the foundation of the American dream, quality of life.
So how many times have you been asked to run for office?
Well, you know, I'm 73 years old and getting ready for the greatest hunting season of my life. So like the great philosopher Dirty Harry said, a good man has to know his limitations. So I'd like to think that my calling is to raise hell with those who attempt to represent we the people based on the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and all those foundational values. So I raise hell with those running for office to vet them, to make sure they adhere to their sacred constitutional oath once they get in office.
All right, before I throw this to Kyle, Mr. Nugent, how many times have you been asked to run for office?
Again, you can't count them. It's nonstop since the late 70s. It's all the time. In not just Michigan, but Texas, New Mexico, and other states too, because I travel the whole country all the time and meet with people.
Thank you, sir. All right, Kyle, jump in.
Thank you. Mr. Nugent, you ended up endorsing Captain Mike Brown for governor out of a field of 12 people who are right now raising money to run for governor. Of those 12, Mike Brown is the one who says that he does not believe fraud had an impact in the presidential election. Is there a coincidence there?
I think there is a coincidence there. I spoke with Mike. He is a hero of law enforcement. He represents the most important essence of quality of life in Michigan and America, quite honestly, and that's law and order, which we don't see much of nowadays based on the engineered recidivism. So I'm endorsing Mike Brown because of his warrior spirit. I think he's made a terrible mistake because the footage, the evidence, the sworn testimony proves that the last election was just riddled with fraud. Maybe I can upgrade Mike's understanding of that. But in the meantime, I think he's a great man, and he would definitely bring great upgrade to the once great state of Michigan.
Follow up, Kyle?
Are you going to be endorsing other candidates for either Congress, Attorney General, or Secretary of State? I know folks are reaching out to you, and they would like your endorsement.
Yes, I speak with them on a daily basis, and I'm humbled and honored that they would consult with me. But again, they know that I have a great connection with the pulse of the best families, rock solid in the asset column of Michigan, working hard, playing hard, Michiganiacs. And I endorsed Tom Leonard for Attorney General. He would be such a dramatic improvement over this mess we've got right now. And I go by Constitution, Bill of Rights, work ethic, supporting entrepreneurs. You just talked about Ford abandoning Michigan. Well, nobody trusts this governor. Nobody trusts this administration. The whole Democratic Party has turned on America, and Governor Whitmer has now turned us into a suburb of New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Illinois, and California. How embarrassing is that?
Jordan.
A moment ago, you mentioned fraud. The Senate Oversight Committee had put out a report saying emphatically that there was no fraud in Michigan's election, and is actively now trying to go after individuals who continue to perpetuate that there was the idea of fraud and possibly profited off of it. So then are you saying that you disagree with the contents of that report and that the legislature might have it wrong?
I don't disagree with it. I laugh in its face. I've seen the footage. I've seen the sworn testimony. I've seen the fraud. I've seen the gatherings for this freak Joe Biden compared to the great statesman Donald Trump, when we have 20, 30, 40,000 people, first time ever in politics, chanting, we love you, because he represents the good people of America in the asset column. Joe Biden represents the worst people in America in the liability column. And so everybody knows there was fraud. And Jordan, I don't know how you can hide from this. Didn't you check out the sworn testimony? Didn't you see the footage of the suitcases and the boxes? Come on, wake up.
Jordan, follow up?
I guess I would just respond that the suitcase and boxes. I apologize, but I guess I would just respond that the suitcase and boxes was said at the time to be TV boxes that were bringing in their equipment to and from TCF Center.
No.
I'm just pushing back on what has come out from television reporters saying that was them in those photos and that was not ballots in boxes, but I suppose agree to disagree then there. Different question entirely. Earlier this year, you had contracted COVID. I believe you have made a recovery now since you are in front of us and speaking with us. Has that at all changed your perception on the virus, considering that earlier in the pandemic and throughout the pandemic, actually, you've been pretty vocal about the fact that you believe the virus to be like a Chinese sent something or other?
Yeah, I actually think that the COVID-19 might be a weaponized virus created in Wuhan by Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and Fauci. What? How silly of me. Listen, I got the Wuhan weaponized virus, and I survived quite nicely after a couple days because I did what the government told me not to do, which is what I always do, because what the government tells you to do is always the wrong thing. I took hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, steroids, and zinc, and continued with my healthy lifestyle, being clean and sober and eating venison. And my wife and I recovered in just a few days, which means we have the antibodies and that we have strength and fortified immune system against experimental shots. Your turn, Jordan.
Let's go to Jim. Jimmy?
Motor City Madman, I watched your campfire video that you posted this week. You seem like you're madder than ever.
Oh, I'm happier than ever, but I compartmentalize all the positive stuff and embrace it and fan the flames of positive energy and spirit and all the great Americans out there, but then I identify the rabid dog at the door. The rabid dog doesn't get the same treatment as the good retriever gets. So I improvise, adapt, and overcome. And yes, I'm mad because our government is now orchestrating the invasion of America. Why would
okay, let
we
me
not
ask you this.
press
Let me
the
ask you this.
with the invasion
Was
of America?
January 6th an insurrection?
No, but this afternoon, a couple of my hunting buddies now are going to have an insurrection in the swamp. No, it wasn't an insurrection. It was a protest that the Black Lives Matter and Antifa.
At the U.S. Capitol. At the U.S. Capitol. What happened there? Was it an insurrection? And if not, in your mind, what was it?
All right, take a breath, Jim. I'm going to answer you now. See if you can gather this. What happened on January 6th was a peaceful protest by Trump supporters and Republicans and conservatives that were infested with Antifa and Black Lives Matter wearing Trump regalia that they perpetrated the violence and the vandalism. Those weren't Trump supporters. That was not an insurrection. Only one person was shot by a murdering guard against an innocent, unarmed American who was protesting. She didn't have any right to climb through any windows or to break anything. But no, it was not an insurrection. The insurrection took place at Concord Bridge in 1776. That was an insurrection. It was a beautiful insurrection, by the way.
Jim, you got one?
Having said, yeah, do I get a follow-up? Having said that, do you believe that the rhetoric that President Trump spoke before the group went down to the Capitol has caused everybody, including people like you, to tone down the rhetoric?
No.
Mr. Nugent?
Not
You don't think
logic and common sense.
you don't
I
think
think
it's
Donald
pushing
Trump
certain
spoke
people?
for us.
All right, what you described the word. What word did you use to describe the vaccine? You don't believe it's real, sir?
No, it's not a vaccine. It's an experimental shot. Now, the FDA was forced to authorize it here recently, but they were jabbing people with an experimental shot right up until that fake authorization. I work with dedicated medical professionals, scientists and biologists and virologists, and there's an army, thousands, tens of thousands of professional health masters who call it an experimental shot, and you shouldn't get it if you don't want to get it. I don't believe it's a vaccine. Most of America doesn't believe it's a vaccine. The only ones that are taking it are either gullible or being forced because they're going to lose their job and lose their life and lose their livelihood. This is a tragic time in America. It's an experimental shot, and if you try to give it to me, I'll experiment on you.
Well, would you speak to the people who believe it is a worthwhile vaccine and it is saving lives? Are they just dead wrong? Are they been fed a line from the federal government?
Tim, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the people that went ahead and got the jab. I speak their language. I would speak to them thusly. Bah, 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 bah. They understand that.
Well, so all these millions of people that got the shots, they're just stupid?
Yep.
Well, some might say the same thing about your position of being against the vaccine.
Believe me, they do. And believe me, Tim, I got some buddies. I've got family who took it because of the overwhelming pressure and the propaganda pounding and the fear that has been cultivated by this out-of-control, treasonous government. And Jim can call this rhetoric, but this is the pulse of thinking, critical thinking America. And critical thinking people around the world. The evidence that supports every word I speak outweighs the evidence that you're alluding to. So I'm not alone here. This isn't radical stuff. This is critical thinking based on science, based on medical professionals who are very dedicated, and I take their advice. It's an experimental shot. Don't come near me with your needle.
Mr. Malin.
Yeah, so Mr. Nugent, I listened to a podcast of virologists who say that getting the vaccine has saved millions of lives. Would you disagree with that?
Well, let me ask you, it's Kyle, right?
It is, sir.
Yeah, Kyle. So do you believe that over 680,000 Americans have died from the Wuhan weaponized virus? Or do you know that of those 680,000 claimed that there's health professionals and I forget the actual bureaucratic title, that have come forward and said, this guy died of cancer, this guy died of heart disease, this guy got stabbed to death, and they were forced to write that they died of COVID-19. Tell me you've seen these people testify to that. I dismiss anything from any of the bureaucracy.
Report.
All the alphabet.
I've also heard reports from virologists who say that I've also heard reports from virologists who say that the vaccine has saved lives. Would you concur that that the vaccine has saved lives?
I would concur in some instances where those professionals who are not browbeat into succumbing to the propaganda ministry. And again, we can discuss who's been saved and who's not been saved. If someone chooses to take it and they get proper professional medical advice, I give them all my respect. It's always about choice. And you shouldn't have your business shut down because you refuse to let someone put some medicine into your body that you don't believe in. Are you with me on that at least?
So you basically said earlier that there was fraud in the election. So are you willing to acknowledge here today that Joe Biden was fair and square elected president of the United States?
Of course not. No way.
Well, the Congress and everybody voted. Everything is done.
Oh, yeah, the Congress, they're real trustworthy, too, today, yeah. We are being invaded through the southern border. My own Republican governor in Texas, Governor Abbott, is derelict of duty. How do you stand by and orchestrate an invasion by people that are unvetted, unknown from all around the world during these treacherous times? Don't you see how untrustworthy they've become? Good Americans, thoughtful American, educated American, way smarter than me, they don't trust the government for anything.
Jordan, we have 1 minute. Question, please.
So they don't trust the government. I'm just kind of banking off of that. Do you feel as though there's any way for the wild partisan divide that is occurring right now? How do you see us getting through that? How do you see us getting over that? Or do you believe that's even possible?
Well, it's borderline impossible, Jordan, because of the vast distrust that exists out there that is rightly distrusting. I'd like to see some accountability. Maybe Joe Biden and his son Hunter should be accountable. Maybe Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama for the lies about the video in Benghazi. Maybe the atrocity of the Afghanistan escape failure. I mean, there's so many examples. Maybe Lon Horiachi should be held accountable for murdering Vicky Weaver. We could go on and on. The good people of America do not trust the government. And that breaks my heart because I love the United States of America.
Mr. Nugent, I have to jump in. When are you going to retire?
Not a prayer.
Thank you, sir. It's good to see you again. Thanks for being on the broadcast. Also, thanks for a great panel. All right, and see you next week right here on Off the Record.